When people talk about the paranormal, it often feels like something that happens to someone else, far away, in another place or another time. But for those who've lived through it, those memories never leave. They linger like a scar, etched so deeply that no matter how many years pass, the terror comes rushing back when you close your eyes at night. These are stories that some wish they could forget, but can't. The first story comes from a man named Daniel Miller, who grew up in the quiet town of Henderson, Kentucky. Daniel had never been superstitious. He believed in what he could see and touch, but that changed when his family moved into an old farmhouse just outside of town. The house had stood for over 100 years, its wooden frame creaking with age. On the very first night, Daniel heard footsteps in the hallway. He assumed it was his father checking on things, but when he stepped into the hallway, it was empty. The sound of slow, deliberate steps continued even though he could clearly see no one was there. It wasn't long before his younger sister Emily woke up screaming that a man was standing at the foot of her bed, staring at her with hollow eyes. Their parents brushed it off as nightmares, but Daniel knew she wasn't lying, because he had seen the same thing 2 nights later. A tall man, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, his outline faint as if made of smoke, standing silently, watching. Daniel would later find out that the farmhouse had belonged to a man who had taken his own life inside it decades before. Whether the shadow was him or something darker, Daniel never found out. But even as an adult, he swears he still dreams of that smoky figure every now and then, and every time he wakes up drenched in sweat, his body frozen in fear. Then there's the story of Sarah Johnson from Portland, Oregon. Sarah had taken a summer job working at a small bed and breakfast tucked away in the hills, a beautiful old Victorian house that had been restored for guests. On her first night shift, she was assigned to clean up the parlor area after midnight. As she was dusting the mantel, she noticed the mirror hanging above it fogging over as if someone had breathed against the glass. Confused, she wiped it down, only for the fog to return seconds later, this time with a faint outline of words appearing across it. "Get out." She dropped the cloth and stumbled back, thinking maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But then, the rocking chair in the corner began to move, slowly rocking back and forth as if someone invisible sat in it. Sarah tried to convince herself it was just the draft from the old windows, but when she turned back to the mirror, she swears she saw a face, an old woman's face, sunken and pale, looking directly at her from the other side of the glass. Sarah quit the job only a week later. The owner, when pressed, admitted that guests had often complained about strange occurrences in the house, but she insisted no harm had ever been done. Sarah never returned, but even years later, whenever she sees her own reflection in a mirror, she swears she sometimes catches a glimpse of that same woman staring back at her, just for a split second. Another unforgettable story comes from a truck driver named Michael Harris, who spent most of his life driving long-haul routes across the country. Michael had his share of strange nights, but there was one trip through the Nevada desert that still haunts him. It was past 2 a.m., and he hadn't seen another car for hours. The road stretched endlessly, the desert surrounding him like a dark ocean. That's when he noticed a figure on the side of the road. A woman, dressed in a pale dress, waving her arms as if begging for help. He slowed down and pulled over, concerned she might be injured. But when he stepped out with his flashlight, the woman was gone. Just gone. Thinking maybe fatigue was playing tricks on him, Michael climbed back into his truck. But as he looked into his side mirror, he saw her, sitting in the passenger seat of his cab, her head turned toward him. He slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, only for the seat to be empty when he turned. Shaken, he forced himself to keep driving. For the rest of the night, he caught glimpses of her in the mirrors, sometimes behind him, sometimes beside him, but never there when he looked directly. Michael swears it was real, and to this day, he refuses to drive that particular stretch of road after dark. In Chicago, a college student named Jessica Turner had an encounter she could never explain. She shared an apartment with 2 friends in an older building that dated back to the early 1900s. The apartment had a charm to it, but there was something unsettling about the long hallway that led to her bedroom. On one late night of studying, she was walking down that hallway when she heard faint whispering. She stopped, thinking it was her roommates, but when she checked, both of them were fast asleep. The whispering grew louder over the following weeks, always in that hallway, always just out of reach. Then one night, Jessica saw a shadow moving along the walls, long and thin, stretching unnaturally across the ceiling. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow slid into her room ahead of her and disappeared into the corner. For weeks, she couldn't sleep without the lights on. Eventually, she moved out, unable to handle the feeling of being followed. The next tenants would later mention the same whispers in the hallway, as if the building itself was alive, keeping some long-forgotten secret trapped in its walls. Finally, there's the story of a young couple, Ethan and Laura Matthews, who bought a small home in upstate New York. They were excited to settle down, but from the very first night, they knew something was wrong. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed upstairs when no one was there. Doors slammed in the middle of the night, and objects moved from one place to another. But the most terrifying moment came when their baby monitor picked up not the cries of their infant son, but a deep, gravelly voice whispering words they couldn't understand. Ethan rushed into the nursery, only to find their son sleeping soundly in his crib. Laura unplugged the monitor, but even after that, the house felt heavy, oppressive, as if something unseen was always watching. They lasted only a few months before putting the house back on the market, moving far away, and refusing to ever speak about it again. These stories are just a glimpse into the chilling experiences people carry with them forever. For those who've lived through it, the paranormal isn't something to joke about. It's something that burrows deep into the memory and refuses to fade. Maybe there are explanations for these things, or maybe not. But what's certain is that when you've seen something that defies everything you thought you knew about the world, it changes you. And no matter how much time passes, the memory lingers, waiting for the quiet moments, the late nights, when the shadows stretch long and silence fills the room. That's when you remember, and that's when you realize some stories stay with you forever, whether you want them to or not.